Andy's doing the comments, and it's Amanda doing the live stream.
Andy with the comments, Amanda with the live stream. Andy and Amanda, thank you very much for your help this evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Welcome, everybody. And let's take a look at our agenda. Oh, that wasn't it. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to stop sharing and make sure that I've got my agenda up and nothing else. There we go. Do this again. Apologize. Okay. So we've got at least 6 here that I see. Did I see Eric Brown joined? Hey, Eric, how's it going, man? Nice to see you. Dr. Walter will be a couple of minutes late. Nicole Olween will be is an excused absence tonight, but we do have 6, which is enough for quorum, a majority of current members. We're still waiting on Joe Bauer and Wayne and one more. Am I forgetting somebody?
Nicole.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Nicole.
Who's number 11? Yeah, Nicole is an excused absence.
Oh, sorry.
I'm forgetting somebody here. Maybe
Did you hear from Wayne?
I have not heard from Wayne.
Okay.
I haven't heard from Joe, so we'll hopefully they will. Oh, Rob. That's what I'm missing. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Just to have assurance of Zoom recording, we are live streaming and recording, so people can watch us on the YouTube. Any questions or comments about our agenda this evening? I did add one item shortly before the meeting. It kind of slipped my mind that it's December, and the next time we meet will be a new year, and we need to elect officers yearly for the ECC. So I did add that to the new business when we get to it. Any other questions, additions, deletions, suggestions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Kornheiser, do we have another guest with us, Ms. Vosberg?
Yes, hello. My name is Cheryl Vosberg, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council. So I'm just here joining in, and I'll just basically be watching Kenny's presentation.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for paying visit to our committee. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Welcome. Cheryl, I explained to Ken a couple of minutes ago that we will have probably a lengthy section of our meeting here where we've got quite a few public comments. And then Jamie McCarthy will present for 15 or 20 minutes, and then it'll be Dr. Kornheiser's turn.
Okay, great.
So just to let you know the order of events here. Any questions about, oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Agenda is approved. Oh, I'm sorry. We need a second. Second, we got to follow the rules of order here.
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
Okay. Agenda is approved. Thank you, Dr. Meluish. Approval of October minutes. I did send out a draft copy of the November minutes. Please respond in the next week or so if you have any corrections to the November minutes, and I can send those along to city staff. The October minutes, I didn't receive any more corrections for, so we do have a final copy of the October minutes. Unless there's a question about that, is there a motion to approve the October minutes?
October or November?
October.
Okay. So motioned.
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. The October minutes are approved. Any announcements?
I do have a quick note for November's minutes. There's a highlighted Rebecca S. I believe that's Rebecca Silence. And she emailed me
Silence.
later. Yep, like the lack of sound.
Silence. Yeah, I have that on my notes too. That was the
Perfect.
last name.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we do have a jam-packed, action-packed agenda this evening. We've got quite a few citizen calls that we're going to listen to here in a minute. We'll hear from Jamie McCarthy and about the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, and then we'll hear from Dr. Kornheiser from the Kalamazoo Valley River Watershed Council about river issues. And then I was hoping that we could have a discussion about a draft recommendation on deer issues that I shared with you all. I know Gail shared basically some same recommendation with a couple of edits, and we'll kind of go over that together. So let's go ahead and get started. Can we hear any citizen comments that we have?
Yes, please stop sharing so I can start the audio.
No problem.
Thank you. This first message is a little garbled. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. It's just how it came in. The rest clear up nicely.
This is David Riggs. I am a city resident. It's for the ECC radio on December 15th. My yard and neighborhood is being overrun by the overpopulation of deer. The deer are systematically destroying almost every native plant that I put in that is not fence. All kinds of repellents do not work for me. So the species of plants that I'm putting in to try to restore the health of the land for pollinators and for birds is being wiped out by deer browsing during the winter and during the spring and also throughout the summer. Thus, the biodiversity of my small plot in the city of Kalamazoo is being limited to a very few species that the deer will not eat, thus threatening the biodiversity of my plot and of the native environment in general. This biodiversity is a crucial key to surviving climate change. Overpopulation of deer is also, in my opinion, at about 1,000% of the historic levels. That's 10 to 1 from what my reading in the scientific literature is. This means that the deer are unhealthy, they are starving, and they are often miserable. In addition, this overpopulation of deer is a danger to people who live in this area from tick-borne diseases, from car collisions, and also from bicycle collisions. Two of my good friends have been in the hospital because of deer bolting out of the undergrowth as they cycle past. So this deer overpopulation needs to be investigated and find some way to correct it, both for the sake of the deer and for the health of the people, not to mention the health of the environment. Deer population is scientifically demonstrated to be destroying the native landscape in our state, and in Pennsylvania in particular. It is clear that forests will never recover to anything like their natural healthy state so long as deer overbrowse all new tree seedlings.
Hi, this is Christine Prouty at 1904 Waite Avenue. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm calling about the deer call option that has been tossed around by members of various communities I'm very opposed to a deer call in the Winchell neighborhood or any of our other neighborhoods in the city. I have no desire for sharpshooters to come in, take the deer out. It's really not a problem. I see that the Kalamazoo College and then the school here at the corner has done some research concerning whether there's a negative human impact from the deer, and that it's a no. So my point is, let it be. The deer aren't hurting us, and I enjoy them. Thanks so much. I can be reached at 269-349-5089. Bye.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Barea, B-A-R-E-A. I live in the Winchell neighborhood in Kalamazoo. I'm contacting you to voice my strong opposition regarding a proposed deer cull in the deer management plan because they are inhumane and not effective. There are effective ways to coexist with deer in an urban area, and most people do. This issue is one for a few, but not for the majority of us. I am requesting that the raw deer survey data and numbers, not just the summary report, be made available to the public now for an open and transparent process. The community is not a part of the conversation until we see the data. I am also requesting that the final management plan proposal be made public and not just when presented to the City Commission. I live in the Winchell neighborhood, and the thought violent guns could be used to kill deer in neighborhoods I live, run through, and go for nature walks in terrifies me. I moved to this neighborhood specifically due to the abundant green spaces, preserves, and wildlife, including deer. I am horrified and outraged this option is even being considered. Thank you for your consideration in this most important matter. I would like to reiterate this violent and cruel option is being driven only by a few and does not represent the majority of Kalamazoo City residents who peacefully coincide with wildlife. Thank you for your consideration.
Hi, my name is Catherine Barber. I live in the city of Kalamazoo on Montrose Avenue. My wishes are I'm trying to contact the Environmental Concerns Committee. My issue is that I'm opposed to killing deer as a management plan for dealing with the population of the deer. I don't think it's humane, and I don't think it's effective. I know other cities have used birth control and have had success with that, and that's what I hope Kalamazoo will do. I'm a little concerned about the survey that I heard about. I only heard about this issue coming up last night. I have questions about the survey. I'd like to know more about it. How many people were in the survey, and how was the survey worded? Are respondents representative of the whole city of Kalamazoo, or are they mainly one group or one neighborhood? I think it's very important that the management plan, when it is decided on, should be made public to the whole community. Not just one time, not just in one place, but I don't know, maybe talk to Channel 3 and tell them this issue is being discussed. I don't think it should just be announced at a commission meeting. It should be publicized. The last thing that I want to say is very important to me. I think that living with nature improves the quality of life in the city. I think the quality of life is one of the issues that should concern the Environmental Concerns Committee. We share this land. We have some green spaces, luckily, in town, and there are animals living there. We can live alongside of them and in harmony with them. We don't have to kill them. We can control the population in a more modern way and a more humane way. That's what I really wish to leave with you, is that I'll miss them if they're killed. They're gentle and they are beautiful, and we can find a way to share our space with them. My name is Catherine Barber. I live on Montrose Avenue in the city of Kalamazoo. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, hi. My name is Tom Duffield from Kalamazoo, and I'm calling to oppose the deer call. Main reason is it just doesn't make sense to to have a problem or have an issue and then to resolve it by killing. There's so many other options that are more passionate, more conservative, and reliable, more safer for the deer. If you look at the research and the results from Ann Arbor and what they've done with the deers, with the compassionate type techniques, that would be great. And also, I've been hearing about this survey. If you could make sure that this raw data from the survey is made public, and that the final plan proposal is made public too. It's very important that we have transparency in an issue of this nature. So once again, I oppose the deer call for the reasons I mentioned, and I thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Eponine Garrett. I live in the city of Kalamazoo in the Oakwood neighborhood. My voice sounds terrible because I am sick, thankfully not with COVID. But I'm calling to express my concern that any deer management proposal being brought to the city commission should not include culling as an option. It shouldn't even be on the table. The data was collected and the group was led by, to my knowledge, representatives particularly from the Oakwood Windshield community neighborhood, particularly led by somebody whose experience is in business. Cultivating a report of this nature is not something that somebody with a business background has the right field and background knowledge to do. This should be done in a scientific manner with accurate scientific data driven by community responses to a quiz that is not biased, or survey that is not biased as the one that was sent out. The raw data from the survey should be released to the public so that we have access to understand what was asked, and the skewed input of the questions should be examined by a neutral third party to assess what degree of bias was presented in the survey that was published by the city. There should be no deer call option on the table. If we even need to proceed to use budget for a deer management program, that should be carefully considered, as this would definitely take away from budgeting in other areas. So I would ask the group that is spearheading this mission against the deer if they would prefer that funding be taken away from more serious issues like houselessness here in Kalamazoo, or from the folks that need assistance for meals through the meal programs and food banks, or what other area they would like to see funding cut to protect their hostas. That is what I have to say, and I hope that you will either proceed with no recommendation on a deer management plan, as one is not necessarily needed for our city at this time because we don't have data to support either way, or if you do decide to proceed, that a cull is off the table and not part of the recommendation. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Silence. I've lived in the city of Kalamazoo for 30 years. I own a home in the Hillcrest neighborhood, which borders the Kleinstuck Nature Preserve, and I'm opposed to any deer management plan that includes culling as an option. Culling is an ineffective and expensive way of attempting to manage deer populations. Many communities who've tried culling, including Ann Arbor and Rochester Hills, have stopped after finding that culls actually increase the deer population long term. Other cities have become trapped in an endless cycle of repeating the culling process every year, wasting money without solving anything. Kalamazoo should be a leader in developing non-lethal methods of managing deer. And while it may take more thought than simply killing them, it could help set standards and protocols around the country. Culling is inhumane, ineffective, and unpopular with the majority of Kalamazoo residents. Do we really want to create another reason to be divided and angry at each other? Ultimately, the city would be much better off educating the public on how to coexist with our wildlife, including our deer. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Donna Keller, and I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm calling to address the Environmental Concerns Committee. For nearly 20 years, my husband and I have lived in the Winchell neighborhood here in the city. When we moved in, deer sightings were quite rare and exciting. Today, it is rare not to see a deer daily in the neighborhood. In fact, I often see deer more often than I see squirrels. We have had as many as 17 deer in our yard in one day. For the last 12 years or so, we have been restoring our wooded backyard with native woodland plants, shrubs, and trees. This effort at hosting a more diverse array of flora has been thwarted by deer with voracious appetites. We cage the small trees and spray plants with deer repellent to protect them, but on nearly an acre, there isn't a way to keep so many deer from eating all that we plant. According to a November 2021 article in Bridge magazine, this is a common problem in the southern portion of the Lower Peninsula. Increasing deer herds decrease understory plants and the many bird and other animal species that depend on the understory, and increase the likelihood of disease in the deer population. Car-deer collisions continue to increase as well. I strongly urge the ECC and ultimately the City Commission to take action to study deer density and the impact of increasing deer populations within the city. Local efforts to stem the loss of biodiversity, however valiant, will remain unsuccessful as long as the deer population remains out of balance. Thank you, ECC, for all that you do to advocate for a healthy environment in the city of Kalamazoo.
My name is Patricia Hollis, and I am a resident of Kalamazoo City, and I'm calling in regards to the environmental concerns meeting that is being held this afternoon, and specifically in regards to the proposal for a deer cull. Those of us that are concerned about something like that happening in the city limits would like to see the final management plan proposal be made public. It would be beneficial to us to see numbers and to, again, try to advocate to have a different plan, something other than a cull. There's many other ways to control deer population within the city, and with killing the deer, it's a short-term solution to an ongoing problem, which will continue to be ongoing as long as the city continues to develop without a thoughtful plan for the wildlife that is contained within the city limits. There is different types of control in terms of birth control. Some relocation plans have turned out to be pretty successful, and we definitely want those options put on the table. I thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Chelsea Zenker. I am a resident of Kalamazoo, and I would like to state my opinion on the proposed deer cull in Kalamazoo. I am opposed to a deer cull as it is an ineffective and inhumane solution. We need to find a way to coexist with our animal residents rather than disrupt the ecosystem. People are saying we have too many deer, and yet there's talk of a predator hunt in February. So what's the real motivation behind this cull? There are studies proving that deer culls don't work dating all the way back to the 80s. So I mean, we're in 2020. I really think we can come up with something better. I would also like to request that the raw deer survey data numbers are made public and transparent, as well as the details to the final management proposal, rather than just a summary of either of these reports. I believe that they need to be completely transparent to the people of the city. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Hi, my name is David Banak. I live in the city, and I am calling about the proposed deer management plan that is being discussed by the Environmental Concerns Committee. I am calling to express my disapproval of any option currently put forward that includes a cull. So far, this project to plan whether or not to do this cull, what this management plan will look like, has been done subjectively without full public comment and is not based upon any scientific data, which is a really poor way to do a management plan. And if there is scientific data behind it, then that needs to be made public because the public deserves to know. The deer in this community are a public resource. There's no one in any neighborhood who has a right to say that those deer should be killed and take that away from every other person in the community. I urge you to disapprove of any option for a cull, and I also urge you to please make all of the information transparent and to include real, meaningful public comment. Thank you.
Hello, this is Tom Kapinski. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo. Deer have been semi-domesticated animals due to human management, mismanagement actually of the environment. If deer numbers should in fact need to be managed in the city of Kalamazoo, they should be managed with humane methods. I am strongly opposed to shooting deer inside city limits. Thank you very much.
Hello, ACC. It is Iris Potter in Kalamazoo. And again, I oppose the deer call option in any new management plan. I also urge the ECC to oppose it because they are ineffective, resulting in population rebound, and are costly when there are really important community issues for the majority of citizens, not just the few. But most importantly, calls or kills are inhumane. Sharpshooters in our closed parks or preserves, while they heavily bait deer and just shoot at pretty close range, is not a scene I want in my city, nor are they guaranteed safe. What kind of example would this give to our young people and community when gun violence is on the rise? The thought of it happening horrifies me, thinking of the deer and more. About the deer survey, which we, the public, completed earlier in the year, why haven't the raw data results been given to us when we have asked repeatedly? It should not be a private survey as it was referred to by Mr. Kushner because the city put it out. He also said the plan or report from the ad hoc committee was in final draft form. Once it is final, the public must have that too before it may go to the city commission. Transparency and open process is critical and just. Right now, we are in the dark and only guessing, which is unfair. We do not have all of the information and survey findings that you have, so we can't even be part of the conversation. What is the reason? But as an ECC member said, why does anything have to be done? And another member said he plants juniper as a deterrent to deer but does not want to kill them. Some cities have education resources for residents. Ann Arbor is not doing calls now, and that's what they do. We have always coexisted with deer, and they are a Michigan native species. I have not seen any more than usual, and they appear healthy. We know that deer are easy scapegoats for a variety of systemic issues causing forest growth concerns, including fertilizers, natural dynamics like disease, land development, and climate change, for a few. So a letter was sent to Chair Wright earlier in the week from Dr. Loeffler, veterinarian and medical director at Kalamazoo Humane Society, who is also a Winchell resident. In part, she said, I am strongly opposed to a deer call on grounds of unsustainability, damage to health of our society, and violation of animal welfare. Educate the community about Kalamazoo's proactive, humane approach to a community problem, and establish Kalamazoo as a leader in problem solving. Killing the deer only established our community as brutal, wasteful, and outdated. End of quote. Calls are about killing deer and not about resolving conflicts or inconveniences. Education is. Kalamazoo can do it right, so please recommend no cull, which is the right, non-lethal, and humane option. Thank you for your service, and happy holidays. Bye.
My name is Michael Bishak, and I am a resident of Kalamazoo. I would like to state my opposition to a deer cull in Kalamazoo. Historically, deer culls have been ineffective, and I believe there is a humane solution to a minor issue. I believe it is an inhumane solution to a minor issue. I would also like to request that the raw deer survey data is made public, as well as transparency with the final management plan. Thank you.
Hi, this is Katie Bloom, and I wanted to leave a message for the Environmental Concerns Committee that I fully support culling the deer as a part of an effort for Kalamazoo. Thank you very much. My phone number is 605-941-7162 if there needs to be a callback. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Andrew G, and I live in Kalamazoo, city of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I am calling to state that I am opposed to any form of deer call for deer management. Thank you.
And that is the last of the citizens' comments at this time.
Okay, well, we appreciate all the input from citizens calling in to our meeting today. And I also received quite a few emails that, shared kind of some of the same comments. I shared a document with the rest of the ECC last month that's in our shared drive, where I've copied and pasted all the emails that I've received from citizens concerned about possibility of a deer call. So thanks again for calling in, everybody. Let's go ahead and we will get to talking about a possible draft recommendation on deer issues, but after we've heard from Jamie McCarthy and Dr. Kornheiser. So Jamie, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Wright, and thanks for giving us some time on your very busy agenda this afternoon. Appreciate that. I'm Jamie McCarthy. I'm with the city's Community Planning and Economic Development Department, and I'm really excited to have my coworker here, Mr. Nolan Bergstrom, and we are here to give you a summary of the city's draft sustainability plan. You can expect that will be out later this month. You will get a copy in your inbox. I will send that through Chair Wright, and you guys will get a copy as soon as it's out. But tonight, I just wanted to go over some of the bigger details. We're gonna, dive into those so that you're prepared to review that plan. And then we're gonna end, Nolan's gonna talk a little bit about the engagement that we have planned for the first part of the year. So let me share my screen here. All right, you should be able to see that. Is the size okay? Good. Okay. So to give you an overview here, the plan has 10 overall overarching goals, really talking about the results that we need to see and track against to create a more sustainable Kalamazoo. And to accomplish those 10 goals, we have 28 different strategies that are outlined in the plan. That's a targeted plan of action that connect back to each of the goals. And then within those 28 strategies, you're going to see 85 actions. It's a whole bunch of actions. It gets sort of detailed down to the different tasks that we feel we need to accomplish each of the strategies. And I just wanted to mention, you're going to see this plan with all of these tasks or all these actions. And actions are likely to change and shift over time. When you see them, they're not really in like a chronological order necessarily, but it's really those 28 strategies that will, those will stay the same and those will continue to guide us. And then again, those 10 goals are what we can measure against to see our progress over time. So I'm going to go into each of these goals by chapter. There are 4 main chapters of the plan that really get into sustainability. And so you can see here, the way it's broken out, goals 1 through 3 are related to creating a more connected and complete transportation or mobility network. And then the next 3, goals 4 through 6, are all about a more efficient and affordable city. And so that's really focused on energy efficiency and clean energy. And so those 3 goals relate to that chapter. Goals 7 and 8 are about resiliency, community resiliency, both in our natural environment and within our community and related to public health. And then the last 2 goals are in our final chapter, which is green circular economy. And it's ways that we can create a more local and circular food economy, and then also quite a few actions related to waste diversion and recovery and creating new markets in Kalamazoo. So if we kind of go chapter by chapter here, I thought it might be interesting here. You can see how many strategies and how many actions. So how many of those 28 strategies or how many of those 85 actions kind of break out by chapter. And so here you can see there are really three big goals in the Accessible Connected Network, that transportation network chapter. The first is really thinking about more sustainable land use and increasing density where it makes sense and where it fits into the different city zone districts, and using that density or knowing that that density is needed to create greener modes of transportation, whether that's increasing our ability and services of our public transit system, creating safer and more accessible, walkable, non-motorized type trailways and systems. And so we know that density is kind of key to that and key to making our neighborhoods safer, more walkable and accessible. Goal number two is a number of strategies related to creating a greener transportation system. So that's really thinking about all different types of users and including an eventual EV charging network and how that will look and be distributed throughout the city. And then it also talks a bit about green stormwater infrastructure in general, but then it points to green stormwater infrastructure as well. And then last, we have a goal around making transit more viable for more users throughout the city. And there are some strategies and actions related to that goal. The next chapter is Affordable Efficient City. And again, this is the chapter that's really focusing on both energy efficiency and cleaner energy sources in the city. I'd say, you can see there's a little bit higher percentage of strategies in this chapter. And I think all of the chapters, you're going to see around a quarter of the strategies and actions kind of distributed equally. But this is really a core part of this plan. And I'd mentioned that this chapter is a bit more unique than other plans throughout the city, right? We have plans that already address transportation or kind of overlap with transportation. Sort of the same thing about our green, healthy economy, and then also about the resiliency chapter. But energy really didn't live in very many places or other plans in the city. And so that's what I think really makes this plan unique. And so this is probably the biggest chapter or section of the plan. And the goals really relate to accelerating clean energy, especially solar is the recommendation in this plan, and how we can both from a policy standpoint and from an action standpoint start to make those investments and make that process more streamlined for more investment in the city into clean energy. We also have a goal all about buildings. So that's making our current building stock more efficient and retrofitting it to be accessing more clean energy. And then also about how building new buildings, we need to advance more rigorous energy standards to make those more energy efficient and cleaner. And then last, we have a section on decreasing emissions from not only city vehicles, but also the infrastructure of the city. If we think about infrastructure assets, we're talking about the lighting network, we're talking about the extensive system of pumps that power our drinking water supply, a lot of things that depend either on diesel or gasoline or the current energy power grid. The third chapter here is Healthy Prepared Community. And again, this one's all about resilience. It's about natural environments. So you're going to see things like tree canopy. You're going to see actions working toward more biodiversity, even in an urban setting. We're looking at more healthy and resilient communities. So we're thinking more public health. So that's things like mitigating flooding, working climate projections into our existing emergency preparedness and emergency plans and hazard mitigation. And then also thinking about some of the programs we have at the city to remediate or abate lead and replace drinking water lines and things like that. And then our last two goals are in the Green Circular Economy chapter. And so here we're talking about ways, again, to support a more circular and local food economy, working with partners throughout the community, and then also reducing waste, thinking about how we can, at the city, support market solutions for diverting and reusing or recovering waste instead of the more linear pathway where we see waste going to landfills. And I'd say this chapter in particular, you're going to see the plan is really written to city type influence or action, but there are all sorts of ways in which we need community partners and we need community champions to step up and take some leadership in some of these different areas. So I think you're going to see a combination of city-led and city initiated projects and tasks, but there are also places for community groups and nonprofits and other organizations to get involved. Okay, so because we have 28 strategies and 85 actions, and that's just a whole lot of work that has to happen in the next 10 plus years, we spent some time and really grateful for a committee of the ECC who helped us think about how would we rate these things? How would we prioritize what we're going to work on first? And through that scoring exercise, we were able to identify sort of the top 6 projects that we really want to showcase to the public. We want folks to be able to kind of be able to sift through that big, long plan and say, okay, this is what we're all going to be working toward. This is what the city is going to be focusing on here in the short term, right? Here in the next 2 to 5 years. And so you can see the numbers here are just going to, in the plan, you're going to see they're referenced in a table, so you can pick them out, but they are color coded to reflect what chapters they're from. So the 3 in sort of the teal green color, those are from that energy chapter. So about half of them are really focused on energy and carbon emissions reductions from our built environment. And then we wanted to make sure we were using or focusing on actions that kind of covered the breadth of the plan. And so we chose the top 3 scoring strategies from each chapter. And so that's where we get 1 from the resiliency chapter, we get 1 from the green circular economy chapter, and 1 from the transportation chapter. And so you can see here, solar certainly scored really high in our ranking process. And the plan will get into, and you can read all about, how this prioritization framework was put together, but it really focuses kind of on 2 things. The feasibility of a strategy, how close are we ready to launch this? And then also we use some ECC scoring, or from our committee, some scoring that kind of weighted projects toward how valuable they were at mitigating climate change or helping us adapt. And so solar definitely scored at the very top of that list. So you can see here a strategy to make sure we're streamlining the permitting process and making sure it's, we're removing any barriers to putting in all sorts of different installations or deployment of solar and other renewable energy. But I know solar kind of rose to the top as really an ideal renewable energy for an urban setting. And then we also have this more action-oriented strategy, which is piloting that community solar project. And so that's right here at the top of our list on the top 6 strategies. And then also retrofitting and weatherizing buildings ended up scoring really highly. And then from the other 3 chapters, we see community health getting a high score. So we have actions toward community health that we're going to prioritize right to the top of our list. We have some work we want to do in really digging through our zoning code and making sure that it's allowing, and in as many places as possible, growing more food and also allowing the sale and production of food. And then lastly, we had this density and sustainable land use strategy really rise to the top in our scoring. And so all of the strategies and all of the actions have a timeline associated with them, and you're going to see that in the plan. But we felt like there were some high priority actions or high priority strategies that fell to the bottom of the list because of a couple of reasons. One, if that's a project that's really extended, that we know is going to really require work past the timeline, past the 10 years of this plan, maybe it's going to take a couple of decades to accomplish, it ended up getting a lower feasibility score. And the same thing, if a project was really expensive and we haven't identified that funding source, it also ended up getting a lower feasibility score. But we knew that there were key early implementation type actions that we needed to be doing now so that we're, poised in the future if the opportunity arose that we have a really great funding source that wasn't around before, that we'd be kind of ready to launch into these projects, or just to make sure that we're making progress on a project that may take 10 or 20 years to finalize. And so what you're going to see in the plan is what we're calling our high priority wait list. They're projects that may have one big missing component, like funding is always a big one. But if we know infrastructure funding is on its way, we don't know what that looks like, but we wanted to make sure that we're identifying projects and keeping them on our radar that are really ready to go if one key piece or opportunity comes along. And so you're going to see this list on there as well. And just to recap, we're looking at things like large flood mitigation projects, electrifying city fleet, which I think we have some early planning to do, but then when the funding comes in place, we could either do something faster if we had more money, or the way this is set up now would be it's more incremental. It'll take more time. Investing in more stormwater infrastructure, especially green stormwater infrastructure, and then increasing the tree canopy across the city, which is certainly a long-term type project. I'm going to let Nolan pop in here and talk to you about progress on a greenhouse gas inventory and how that will be used over time as a measure. And then I'll let him finish up with what we see for community engagement after the plan is released.
Thanks, Jamie. Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan. I'll try to keep this brief because it's been a little bit of a sticking point, but the greenhouse gas inventory has really been something that we've strived for, but has been difficult to find the right partners and difficult to pool resources in a way where we can build a foundation and set a standard for measuring greenhouse gas reduction for the city. Part of that is building trust with partners, so like a consumer's energy, and also setting up data sharing agreements. And then the way the data comes to us, are we getting enough of it? Are we able to plug it in, so to speak, with the foundational inventory that we want to track, as we move forward? And a part of a big piece of that in this sort of triangular partnership here is building relationships with educational institutions where they might have access to resources and expertise that we just don't have capacity to handle at the city. So a good example, this initial greenhouse gas inventory is going to be community-wide and holistic, and it wouldn't have been possible without the help of a graduate intern to help establish this baseline. And the hope is that as it builds into the future, each time we can be tracking and measuring, where we're improving, where we may not be, what our limitations are. So I think it's been a good exercise in understanding where the city's at, what we have to do with our partners to sort of build out the greenhouse gas inventory into something that we can really lead with. Jamie, next slide for me. And so transitioning that into public participation. So the plan is hopefully to have some centralized locations where we can, at the very least, one in-person event where we can have a table set up, just have an open dialogue with people in person to talk about sustainability and other city programs, and then to jumpstart things in January into February, and then also to have a series of listening sessions. Especially with the current climate, we wanted to do this in person with sort of a hybrid component, but we're thinking You know, we want to be flexible with the public participation. And so the listening sessions might be our best bet. So it'd be sort of a sit down, talk to us. We'll try to answer any questions about the plans, the plan scope and sort of what we want to accomplish. Because it can be a lot with all the actions and strategies and goals. And then, of course, there's always the Imagine Kalamazoo webpage that'll be available to leave comments throughout this entire process. So really, it's trying to have a launch post, a good public engagement plan and launch post holidays. Give something for the public to really analyze and look at and ask us any questions they have.
Thanks, Nolan. I think with that, that's what we have today. So we're happy to answer any questions. Stop sharing now.
Thanks so much for presenting to us today.
Yeah.
Bobby, you got a question?
Yeah. Hey, Jamie, a couple times you mentioned the term green stormwater infrastructure. Can you shed some light on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so that's using more natural or green solutions to stormwater infrastructure instead of the more traditional gray, catch basin pipe underground kind of stormwater infrastructure. And I think some of what you're going to see in the plan is taking, updating some of our stormwater standards, which we're set to do with the city. We have a little bit higher stormwater standards within our natural features protection overlay district. And so the stormwater treatment that you're required to do on a property that's being redeveloped, a portion of that has to be green infrastructure. So that might be rain gardens, swales, things where we're using, more of a bio solution to stormwater and seeing how we might, we've been able to test that on properties throughout the city for the last few years and seeing how that might translate to all new or redevelopment projects in the city.
All right. And that leads to less direct discharge to surface water bodies too. So
that's right.
Yeah, ultimately. Thank you.
I have a question as well. Let me look at the goals again. I guess my understanding from what I knew was goals 4 and 5 basically seem like they should be flopped because I've heard of making buildings more efficient that already exist being a higher priority for actual efficiency versus just jumping into new local energy. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Sharon. And I'll just point out that the way the goals are listed, it's not necessarily in a prioritized way. I think goals 4, 5, and 6, they could be flip-flopped. They're not really ranked, but you will see in the plan more of that scoring. So you'll be able to see, I don't have it right in front of me, but you'll be able to see what the actual scores turned out to be. But yeah, that's a great point about, I think building energy efficiency, we've heard from folks, is definitely a low hanging fruit because it's something that you can be doing now. It can be done at almost every level and it has a variety of costs from low to high. Thank you.
So thank you, Jamie and Nolan, for all your hard work on this. Really excited we're getting down to the wire here. I just have one thought and one question. So my thought is I really like the priority waitlist system you guys came up with in terms of like setting the groundwork for future opportunities that come down the pipeline, like say another infrastructure bill that passes with a couple $1 trillion, since many of us in this room know that 1.5 trillion is far short of what we need anyway. And then I just really like that you're thinking about potentials for costs and investments to change price and time investment over time. And so the question I have is regarding kind of the community engagement process and plan. And so I was wondering if it might make sense to, in addition to the 3 the listening session and the open house and the feedback on the website, if it might make sense, if we're kind of publicizing this all as one thing, like, hey, we have a plan, here's all the options. If it would make sense to publicize that people can come to the January ECC meeting as kind of like a final feedback, like in-person open house thing. And then also, obviously, the city commission is going to have to adopt it. I think the plan now is February. That could be also publicized as like, not only setting a date and putting it on paper, but putting it in front of people like, hey, this is your last chance to, like, in my world, I would say, support the thing, but also, I hope nobody's going to ask for huge changes right when we're about to pass it, but, it could happen. But so my general question is, would it make sense to include ECC and city commission meetings as like the last two steps as part of that plan?
Yeah, I think we'd really welcome that if you're able to accommodate us. I think that the January meeting I think it's really mid-January, right? Is it a little bit earlier? No, it's the 19th for
third Wednesday,
ECC next month. Yeah. But I still think it'd be kind of right in the middle. Like, it would still be a really good time. Folks would be early enough in the process of engagement that we would love to take public comment in that way if folks want to call in. And we're also hoping to be seeking from this group a letter of support as it moves forward to the city commission. And so that could be a nice platform. I agree. So keep us posted if you'd like to invite us back, and we'd be happy to put something together.
I'll just propose no that we do that. Sorry, go ahead, Nolan.
That information could be on the project page too, if that's proposed and something you want to move forward with. We'll also probably, depending on, something to point out, public participation is still not wholly fleshed out. It's in its infancy a little bit still, but we're gearing up with it. But we might need volunteer support as well. Just throwing that out there for ECC members to note, even if that's for something virtual too. Want to accommodate everyone's comfort level and safety level too. So
you can mark me in. I'm happy to harass people about this in public yet again anytime you want me.
Me too.
All right. Do we have any more questions? Although we probably should try to wrap it up and get to Dr. Kornheiser's presentation. Sounds like we'll see a draft copy and we'll still have time to give some feedback. All right, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. Jamie and Nolan, thank you so much for coming this afternoon. We appreciate all the work that you've done over the last few years on sustainability plan. All right, Dr. Kornheiser, that brings us to your presentation on issues related to the Kalamazoo River. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Dr. Kornheiser.
Thank you, Aaron. Let's see, how much time have I got?
Well, how much time were you hoping to?
Well, basically, I can fill as much time as you give me, so you just decide how much time I've got.
Well, let me take a kind of straw poll here of everybody. I mean, typically we try to wrap up by 6. If we can give Dr. Kornheiser 30 minutes or so for a talk and some questions, would everybody be willing to stick around until maybe closer to 6:30 so that we can have a thorough discussion of possible recommendation on deer issues? Does anybody need to run off at 6?
I'm good with staying. I would like to make sure that we get through things.
I can stay.
I can stay.
I can stay.
Joe, are you good to postpone dinner? Thanks very much. And Dr. Walter, I imagine you good to hang around till about 6:30 or so, Gail?
Sure. I'm very food driven, so, I'm food motivated.
Okay. Well, if you start getting cranky, I won't hold it against you.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I've got, let's see, a map here, if I can get it into place properly. There we go. Okay, so this is a bit fuzzy and I can actually go to a larger screen presentation, but in order to focus in on the city of Kalamazoo, this is our best shot. So what I thought I would just make sure before I go into anything else is that everybody actually has a mental image about the Kalamazoo River watershed and the Kalamazoo River as it goes through the city of Kalamazoo. So we've got Kalamazoo and Portage identified in gray. This green outline is the watershed boundary in our area of the city of Kalamazoo. So what I first want everybody to see is that the entire city of Kalamazoo is actually within the watershed. So watershed, if you don't know, is the area of land in which any falling water moving by gravity is going to collect into a single water body or basin. And so all of this green area is area where the water will end up in the Kalamazoo River. So what happens in the city of Kalamazoo, or Portage for that matter, is going to very much affect the Kalamazoo River. In addition, there are some tributaries to the Kalamazoo River within the city of Kalamazoo. This is Spring Valley Creek right here. Portage Creek, as you can see, has got a number of branches that end up in the Kalamazoo River. We've got a portion of Davis Creek and then Arcadia Creek, which goes right, into the Arcadia Mall area. And so what happens in these tributaries also is going to have an influence on the Kalamazoo River and is part of what the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council is concerned with. We are concerned with the entire Kalamazoo River. So at this point, what I will do is open it up and show people that the Kalamazoo River is actually much larger than just what we see in the city of Kalamazoo. It's about 160 miles. There are 2 branches in Hillsdale and Jackson, and then they enter into Calhoun County, and then they enter into Kalamazoo County. And then we go into Allegan County. So the Kalamazoo River and its watershed are much larger than just what is in Kalamazoo. But what happens in Kalamazoo is, of course, very important. And that's why we're here talking to you folks tonight. So just want to show you, who I am. Dr. Kenneth Kornheiser. I'm a retired clinical veterinarian. So I actually live in Berry County, and I was engaged until 2014 in a country practice. I'm in between the Plainwell, Richland, and Delton. Cheryl Vosberg, our executive director, and is our single paid permanent employee, is the executive director, and she is here with us tonight. The Kalamazoo River Watershed Council has got a vision statement. There really are no surprises here. Just what you'd expect that we do is what we do. We are concerned with the Kalamazoo River and the watershed in terms of the environmental protection of the river, but also in terms of how it relates to the community. And a lot of our programs are involved with citizen education and citizen involvement. As far as a history, the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council began as a response to the fact that the Kalamazoo River, from the Morrow Dam all the way to Lake Michigan, is an area of concern and Superfund site. So if you look at the history, at the very beginning, you can see that as early as 1987, it was recognized that the Kalamazoo River had a serious problem. Areas of concern are areas in the Great Lakes Basin, which are of such environmental importance that they must be given special attention. In 1990, the Kalamazoo River from the Morrow Dam to the Kalamazoo River outflow at Saugatuck into Lake Michigan, but also portions of Portage Creek. The Allied Paper area is right within the city of Kalamazoo, and is really part of the Portage Creek watershed. And the problem is what are called PCBs, polychlorobiphenyls. And I can go into a lot more detail, but primarily what these are very specialized paper mill wastes, which were introduced into the river or deposited in lagoons or landfills along the river, left at the site of paper mills. And these are toxins. And when they get into the Kalamazoo River or Portage Creek for that matter, they potentially can cause environmental damage and health problems in human beings. The way they cause health problems in human beings is by passing up through the food chain, inevitably into fish, and from fish into the people who consume those fish. And so that is why it became an area of concern and a Superfund. The water itself is actually not contaminated. There are not significant levels of PCBs, toxic levels of PCBs in the water. The PCBs are bound in the sediments, but even the sediments are very unlikely directly to cause problems with people. The way that problems occur in people is by eating the fish. So without going into great detail, there was a lot of public involvement with regard to the response to the area of concern and Superfund at site of these toxins in the Kalamazoo River. And the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council became the official public advisory council and a public advisory council to the area of concern. Is actually a recognized body within the state of Michigan, within the Great Lakes, and really internationally, given that the Great Lakes are binational, Canada and the United States, and the recognized body to represent the citizens of the Kalamazoo River watershed with regard to cleaning up the Superfund site and then to restoring the river after the cleanup takes place. So you can notice that this all began as this recognition in 1987. Here we are in 2021. We are perhaps a third done with this process. So that just gives you an idea of how difficult and demanding it is. We can talk more about the Superfund if people have questions, but I will move on. The Kalamazoo River Watershed Council, because of its ability to reach out to larger numbers of communities, became recognized as a body that could serve in other helpful ways. So if you notice in 2001, the Lake Allegan Phosphorus TIMDAL program. So TIMDAL stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. Phosphorus is a mineral. And primarily, it is a constituent of a lot of fertilizers and products that are routinely used, including detergents and soaps and other products. And when phosphorus gets into the water, it can cause problems such as algal blooms and other problems that cause a deterioration of the habitat quality of the waters and the usefulness for recreational purposes as well. The reason it's called the Lake Allegan Phosphorus TIMDAL is because a lot of products move downstream and tend to collect in large basins. And the large basins in the Kalamazoo River are primarily the result of dams. And the final large dam on the Kalamazoo River is the one that creates Lake Allegan. And so the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council has been involved as the lead organization, and actually since 2005 as the house of the Lake Allegan Phosphorus Timdale program. In 2005, the Watershed Council convened meetings, a large conference of people from all over the Kalamazoo River watershed, various kinds of state agencies, local agencies, county governments, township governments, the drain commissioners, highway departments, et cetera, to try and determine if there was a way to have a total river watershed wide coordination so that we weren't duplicating efforts, so that we can have much more well-planned and coordinated efforts to protect the Kalamazoo River. And at that time, it was agreed that the best vehicle for this kind of coordination was the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council. And I should mention that conference was done in coordination with MSU, Michigan State University Extension. Okay, so at that time, the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council became involved with many more activities than just responses to pollution. So some of these involved recreational activities, such as the Canoe the Kazoo programs, getting people out and paddlecraft with sort of guided tours and shuttles provided to promote the access to the river and show that it's actually quite a resource. Trash cleanups, the Crazy for the Kazoo program, which were trash cleanups all over the watershed. And a lot of educational programs, rain garden education programs, aquatic invasive species education programs, but many programs, not just pollution response. Unfortunately, pollution response remains necessary. And not only have we got to deal with the Superfund site, in 2010, there was a major oil spill. So the oil spill, and now I will, let's see, go back to the map if I can. So the Kalamazoo River oil spill began in a creek just to the west of the city of Marshall. Oh, here we are, just to the west of the city of Marshall, called Talmadge Creek. So there are large petroleum product pipelines that crisscross the state of Michigan. And one of these is called the Enbridge Line 6B, and it crosses the state of Michigan in the southern tier. And it's like 4 to 6 feet wide pipes carrying hundreds of thousands of gallons of petroleum products every day. And there was a rupture in a pipeline into the Talmadge Creek area, and Talmadge Creek flows into the Kalamazoo River, and oil spilled into the Kalamazoo River all the way down to the Morrow Dam. Now, you might recall that I mentioned that the Morrow Dam is the place where the Superfund process starts. And the oil spill ended at the Morrow Dam. And the reason it ended there is that is where the various environmental response teams actually managed to finally stop the oil from going further downstream. So the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council was intimately involved in the citizen input on this process. And at the time, the president of the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council, an MSU professor named Stephen Hamilton, was also one of the lead scientists helping to direct the cleanup effort from an environmentally sound and scientific point of view. And it took essentially 5 years for that cleanup effort to take place. Close to 1 million gallons of petroleum products were spilled into the Kalamazoo River. As you can imagine, it caused all kinds of problems. It took over $1 billion. It took more than 2,000 people responding, and it took about 5 years to actually get the river to a reasonable level of cleanup. And as I said, the problems actually in terms of pollution continue. Most recently, there are two problems. One that I have not put on this timeline because it's not clear how much the Kalamazoo River itself is involved, and that's the PFAS issue. People are probably aware somewhat of PFAS, perchlorofluorinated alkyl substances, which end up as sort of permanent pollutants once they get into the environment. There are traces of these PFAS in the Kalamazoo River proper, but the actual levels in the water column itself seem to be relatively minor, and B, it seems very likely that the cleanup efforts which are aimed at removing those PCBs in the Superfund site also will remove PFAS that are bound to the sediments in those same areas. So even though there's not a concentrated effort to remove PFAS from sediments in the Kalamazoo River watershed and the sediments, that is taking place as PCB sediments are removed. In any event, the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council is trying to stay abreast of this problem. And that the most recent problem in the Kalamazoo River is a sediment release from the Morrow Dam. So we mentioned the Morrow Dam a couple of times now. The Morrow Dam is a functioning hydroelectric dam. It is just upstream from Comstock. So once again, there is where my arrow is now, is where the Morrow Dam is. And it is actually an active hydroelectric dam. A lot of the interest in restoring the Kalamazoo River as a response to the Superfund site, and the same thing occurred with response to the oil spill, is to actually remove dams that no longer are functional. And there are quite a few dams which fortunately have been removed on the Kalamazoo River. There are a number of more dams that the Kalamazoo River Watershed Council would like to see removed. The DEQ and, Eagle and DNR would like to see removed, because having a continuous flowing river is a healthier habitat for living organisms and makes a better environmental resource. But in any event, actively power generating dams are not going to be removed in any foreseeable future. And so the Morrow Dam is an active dam. In 2019, in the fall of 2019, during an inspection, actually routine inspection done by the company that runs the dam, owns and runs the dam, which is called STS, which is a subsidiary of a larger company called Eagle Creek Renewable Energy, which is a subsidiary of Ontario Power, that's right, Ontario, Canada. So it's a Canadian firm. And they found that there were gates in the dam, that is, that control the water flow, that potentially might fail. And so there was a need to do some kind of action. And it was determined that there was going to be an emergency response as part of the process of actually working on gates in a dam. It is necessary to draw the water down. Normally, this must be done in a very controlled fashion with a lot of protections put in place to prevent sediments from washing downstream. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, every place where the water slows down, a dam being the obvious place where water slows down, is a place where sediments will collect and settle down. And so in what we see there on the upper right, Morrow Lake, this is a large area created by the dam where the water spreads out behind the dam. And it was just filled with sediment, which is just a natural process of the way water works and moving dirt sediment downstream, but it collects in the dam. But in any event, large, thick, heavy deposits of sediment were there. And unfortunately, the emergency response was not done properly. And when they dropped the gates down, sediments were allowed to go flow downstream. And so the sediments from the Morro Dam flowed downstream through Comstock and into the city of Kalamazoo. So the sediments cause a lot of problems. The most obvious problem is that those sediments will collect once again in slower places. And so all along the banks and in places in particular where there are side channels and oxbows and bays and et cetera, shallows, sandbars, they now become clogged with these sediments. Those are places where a lot of the animals in the Kalamazoo River are going to spawn and feed. And so these sediments interfered with spawning, that is reproduction of fish. And the Kalamazoo River is a world-class bass fishery. And this more or less took away 2 major bass seasons. So this, remember, this occurred in 2019. It was not until the spring of 2020 that a lot of fishermen began, and other people using the river began seeing after the spring, melt-off took place, that all of these sediments had washed downstream. And it was only then that the state agencies, primarily Eagle, responded. Since that time, there have been minimal cleanup and response efforts on the part of this dam operator, SDS, Eagle Creek. And there have been a lot of negotiations between the primary responsible agency, Eagle, but also DNR, and the company that operates the dam. But it has not been very satisfactory. And those sediments are largely still there, although to some extent they've washed further down from the places where they had originally collected. So you can see the way the sediments collect, and you can imagine that this interferes with the natural habitat, and so it interferes with the living creatures and how they can use things. So at this point, there's more detail about some of the things I've talked about. Here are, contact points, but perhaps it's time to just open it up for questions. And I guess I'll let Aaron, take care of that. Give people an opportunity for comments or questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Kornheiser, for your very excellent presentation here. I'm sure everybody's got some questions. My biggest question for you is, what can we do? The role of the Environmental Concerns Committee for the City of Kalamazoo is to provide recommendations to the City Commission and to city staff, the City Manager's Office, regarding environmental issues. And our understanding, which you just, added to, is that there's not been a sufficient response from the company responsible for releasing all those sediments into the Kalamazoo River and disrupting the natural flow of the river and wildlife in the river. What can we do as the Environmental Concerns Committee? What should we be recommending to the City Commission and to city staff, to the City Manager's Office?
Well, I think maintaining pressure and attention is the primary thing that citizens can do at this point in time. In general, I have found that, and I've been involved with these kinds of activities since the early 90s. I have found that it can be very frustrating to get, a proper response to issues of pollution and issues of environmental degradation, and that it does take a very persistent effort. So with response to this very specific problem, I think that, keeping a high profile, talking, to the city commissioners, having them interface with the state agencies and having them interface with the state representatives is really important. And keeping the pressure on. is the main thing that one can do. So, I mentioned that there are some problems, and one problem that I didn't mention, which may become of great significance to the city of Kalamazoo, is that one of the things that these sediments are going to do is that they're potentially going to impede the flow of water. And this is sort of an obvious thing, is that you put, layers and layers of sludge in a certain location, and you're going to alter the flow of water. Just a couple of years ago, there was major flooding in Kalamazoo. There's frequently flooding, mostly in terms of Portage Creek and a sort of a dip, a bowl in the area of like Crosstown Parkway and West Edge and Park Roads and like that. But there was a really, really major flooding episode which occurred when there were ice dams on the Kalamazoo River, I believe in February of 2019, which resulted in flooding of the Gull Road, Riverview Road, East Main, Michigan area. And that flooding was so great that there were literally 2 cars 100% submerged underwater, and 1 person died. And so I know that some of this sediment has gotten lodged in the support structures for a railroad trestle, which is along Commerce Drive in Parchment. So we're just a little bit downstream of the city of Kalamazoo, and there are large deposits of that sediment. There are always opportunities for trees and trash to collect in such locations, but with this heavy amount of sediment and a lot of trees, if we get another major ice dam event, I'm afraid that we might find that area of roads in Kalamazoo will be once again totally underwater. So a serious flooding issue. And so I do think that that's something which, the city needs to be very cognizant of. And at the present time, my understanding is that the negotiations have at least stalled. Some people have said that the STS, Eagle Creek, the company who owns the dam, has walked away from negotiations. I don't know if that's true. They've denied it, but in any event, here we are 2 years after the water was drawn down in Morrow Dam and the sediments began being released, and the vast majority, 98% of those sediments are still in place in the Kalamazoo River, and most heavily in the Comstock City of Kalamazoo area. On it's sort of a broader level, I see that a lot of the things that the city of Kalamazoo is trying to do are having some, a response to protecting the environment. Jamie McCarthy laid out a lot of the programs from the city of Kalamazoo. Among the things that are really important that, the environmental, concerns committee can respond to are how the city of Kalamazoo is developed going forward. You understand that there are, environmental overlay districts, and in particular, to the extent that those overlay districts can prevent excessive development, improper development, a loss of pervious surfaces where water can run into the ground instead of running down the roadways and into pipes and then in the river, causing flooding and sediment problems and pollution problems. I think those things are really, really important, that the city is going to be developed, but that the development going forward is done properly. I'm sure the Environmental Concerns Committee can have some role in that.
Okay. Dr. Kornheiser, do you mind stop sharing your screen? I think that way we'll be able to see everybody.
Real quick, I wanted to mention, there were 2 news articles in the last week or so that said that they did stop, or that it seems that they stopped. So it is public. The public has been told basically that they haven't been continuing their efforts of remediation.
Yeah, it's really not clear. I mean, I've actually been in touch with the agencies, and they say, no, there are still negotiations taking place, at least with Eagle and DNR. So that's who I've been in touch with. But they absolutely have stalled. And there was only one small area of sediment right in the village of Comstock that actually was removed. It was approximately 10,000 cubic yards out of what seems to be like maybe 300,000 cubic yards of sediment. So, it really stalled out. And it's a very familiar problem, because basically what happens is that some industrial commercial agent, or even, a government agency, some actor creates a problem, and then getting the response to the problem is very difficult. And it ends up with a lot of legal negotiations. And there actually have been two notices of violation, which Eagle has issued to Eagle Creek, which were supposed to get them to respond. But the way, and now this is, I will say, editorializing here, the way that the agencies tend to respond is to work with these people and work with these people and work with these people, give them the benefit of the doubt, rather than having the ability, the authority, and the legal power to just step in and say, no, this has just got to be cleaned up. You've got to do it. Or in an emergency action, say, we're going to clean it up, and then you're going to pay us back. That just doesn't happen. Or rarely happens. Yeah. So that's editorial comment.
Bobby?
Yeah. Well, you've highlighted the issue with the mere presence of sediment deposits in areas where it impedes the hydrology of the river as a flowing system. My question is, has there been any sampling and analysis of any of those sediment deposits, from a toxicological standpoint, that would give a little more impetus for a public problem that needs to be addressed?
The answer is yes, and it's yes on two different levels. Number one, the sediments in question came from Morrill Lake.
Right.
Those sediments were very, very thoroughly studied as a result of the oil spill. Okay. And so there actually are some remnants of the oil spill that we know are in Morrill Lake. Those are not actually the type of materials that flow easily. So those, and without going into the chemistry, those products are actually still there, mostly under the sediments that did get washed down.
Okay.
So that was done very thoroughly. There have been studies done since that time about, are these sediments heavily polluted? And interestingly enough, a lot of those studies have been done under the auspices of one of the paper mill polluting companies called Georgia Pacific, which actually has been one of the most active and forward thinking of the paper mill polluting PCB producing and introducing companies. And because they have to clean up the PCB sediments in the Kalamazoo River, they have done studies to find out if these new sediments that have washed down are indeed contaminated. For the most part, the answer is not significantly different than the background level of contaminants in the Kalamazoo River.
Okay.
There are no sediments in waters in the state of Michigan, for the most part, that don't have some background level of pollution. So in answer to your question, there have been studies, and to date, that has not been found to be a major cause of concern. The sediment itself from a bulk, obstruction is the main problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Kornheiser tonight? Thanks, Bobby. All right, hearing none. Dr. Kornheiser, thank you so much. Ms. Vosberg, thank you so much for coming to speak with us tonight. We appreciate all the information. and we'll continue to keep Kalamazoo River issues, especially the sediment removal issue, I think as an agenda item for the next few months to think about if we might want to send another message to the city commission or the city manager's office to, like you said, raise awareness, keep the pressure on. As we wouldn't be the only group doing that, but I think the more voices and the more groups that are highlighting this issue and trying to get the river cleaned up, the better. So
I'd make two more comments. One about this sediment issue. That is that one of the places where the sediment is collected very heavily is by the mayor's riverfront park, where like the farmers market and the ball field are, and the sediments there are so heavy that the river is not accessible. Normally, that is a river access location. There's a dock there, and and people can get in the river. And there was a City of Kalamazoo event planned for part of the Canoe the Kazoo, in which we were going to put in to the river there, and found that we could not do so because the sediments made it dangerous. And there was actually an individual who was out there fishing and got into those sediments up to his waist. And he said he was there for hours before some golfers found him. And so that in particular is a very important location, probably to get, that company or, some agency to clean the sediments. And the other is a more general comment, and that is that truly, we remain available for any other kinds of consultations or educational programs or involvement. The Canoe the Kazoo program, the getting people out on the river, the Crazy for the Kazoo, the cleanup programs, many of which the city of Kalamazoo has actually participated in. And please feel free to contact us. We have monthly meetings, and if people are interested, they can contact me or probably Cheryl Vosberg, our executive director, about getting on right now we're Zooms just like you folks. So thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kornheiser. We do have, she's not here tonight, but one of our committee members, Nicole Olwin, is our representative to your group. And so she should be joining your meetings monthly and then kind of reporting back to us. So
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okie dokie. Moving right along. Next agenda item is discussion of possible recommendation to city staff regarding deer issues in the city. So I sent out a draft recommendation. Dr. Walters sent back kind of an edited version. I read through both versions, and I'm perfectly fine with using Dr. Walters' version. Just kind of changed the wording. I don't think it really changed any of the, it didn't really change any of the content of the letter. Just kind of worded it, and some of the wording was a little better. I know that you also added, Gail, the piece about the ban on deer feeding, which I think should be an important part of any public education campaign that the city might initiate.
Yeah, that was probably the major change, was just to put that in the education part that you already had down there.
Yep, and I was thinking about it and didn't put it in there, so I appreciate you doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I am going to read through the recommendation so folks listening at home can hear, and if you haven't had a chance to read it at home, you can hear, and then maybe we can have a discussion about if we want to, if there's any wording that we want to change, if we're interested, if there's a majority that are interested in sending a recommendation. But let's take a look here. Let me share my screen. Okay. So this would go to the mayor, the vice mayor, and city commissioners. But of course, city staff would also see the recommendation. So background on the recommendation, the ECC was provided a draft copy of the Addressing Urban Deer in Kalamazoo report from the ad hoc committee led by Pete Kushner of the Oakland Drive Winchell Neighborhood Association in early November 2021. That was just last month. Mr. Kushner also paid a visit to the ECC meeting in November 2021, so a month ago, to answer questions. The ECC was encouraged by Mr. Kushner and city staff to provide feedback and input, which the ECC greatly appreciated. The ECC has heard citizen concerns over many years about the increasing deer population. Deer population surveys were conducted by students from Kalamazoo Christian High School in 2017 and 2020 and Kalamazoo College in 2020, both of which presented anecdotal evidence of high deer density in some areas. Basically, you know, the Winchell neighborhood area, you know, in and around Asylum Lake, Asylum Lake Preserve, Kleinstuck. While the ECC has discussed citizen concerns over the last few years, there was a recognition that these population surveys were far from comprehensive and precluded a consensus among members of the ECC regarding any action to take, as there was no additional data to demonstrate or document impact secondary to high deer density. The ad hoc committee's report features data that the ECC has not seen previously, including a citizen survey, data on car deer accidents, and incidents of Lyme disease. Mr. Kushner made a case to the ECC that the ad hoc committee's report demonstrated an impact and harm that requires city attention. Now, I've put unanimously in here in red because I'm sure that'll be we'll see where that goes. But the ECC unanimously agrees that a more accurate and professional deer population study, as well as an ecological assessment, should be conducted to help determine negative impacts or harm. The ECC considers harm to the deer population, the human population, and or the overall ecosystem, including local plant, animal, and insect populations, to be appropriate metrics when considering possible measures to manage the local deer population. So here is our kind of brief recommendation. The ECC recommends that city staff, supported by the City Commission, take the following actions based in part on the recent ad hoc deer committee report. 1, city staff should develop an education program for citizens regarding deer management strategies such as unpalatable landscape plants and natural or environmentally friendly chemical repellents, fencing, and other deterrents. The education component should also make residents aware that there is a state law that bans the feeding of deer and that the city will support and enforce this. 2, city staff should review available options for deer carcass removal within the city. 3, city staff should research, identify funding sources, and implement a deer population and ecological evaluation in areas already known to be natural preserves for the local deer herd. The ECC recognizes that there are differing opinions in the community regarding any possible lethal deer management strategies that might be employed here, as they have been in other communities throughout Michigan. The ECC recommends that city staff complete the above recommendations prior to beginning any discussion of deer management beyond non-lethal methods. Until a more comprehensive assessment of the impact of deer on our community and ecosystem is conducted, it makes little sense to begin talking about controversial deer management techniques in our urban setting. And just to clarify the kind of process of where, how we've gotten to this point, there is no city deer management plan. And the ad hoc committee's report is a recommendation to the city to adopt a deer management plan. The city has not agreed to any type of deer management plan. There's nothing that has been budgeted by the city for any type of deer management plan. At this point, the city staff, city commissioners would just be listening, hearing, receiving this information from this ad hoc committee, this report. And I can't imagine that there would be any issue with the raw data from the survey being released. I would imagine it would go to the city commission in their normal packet when they get a chance to review the ad hoc committee's report. The ECC was given a chance to add input to the ad hoc committee's report, and we didn't really provide any additional data or information that actually went into the report. So our contribution to the discussion here is this recommendation, which would go to the city commission and city staff in addition to that ad hoc committee's deer report. I think that's it for my yapping. Who's next?
Aaron, this is Jean.
Hey, Jean.
Hey, I thoroughly support this letter. And just so you know, no deer action is even budgeted in the current 2022 budget that has been proposed to us, and that's going to be voted on in January. So it's not there. What can happen are these educational opportunities, which are minimal budget dollars, but and could go through neighborhood associations and on website and so on. But so there's no budget dollars for that currently. Just wanted to let you know that. And a report could come to a committee of the whole meeting, which is just a public report. People can come in, there is public comment. So we could have a committee of the whole event with the report with Mr. Kushner, with city staff, presenting to the commission so that the commission is fully informed about the options and what's going on. So I would hope that a committee of the whole could be scheduled sometime in the first half of the year to let us know about this and to provide this letter for us. That's all.
All right, thanks, Jean. Any other comments? Bobby?
By the way, thanks to you and thanks to Gail for the revisions in this letter. I have one word that I would like to bring up for consideration. It is in that second paragraph in that same sentence that you have the word unanimously in. Towards the end of that, it says we want to do this and that to help determine negative impacts or harm. That makes it, to me, that makes it sound like that it is a goal to determine that. I recommend that we at least consider, instead of the word determine, something like to assess whether or not there are negative impacts or harm, measure, quantify, evaluate, rather than determine.
Bobby, what if we just added the words any possible? So it says to help determine any possible negative impacts or harm.
I like that as well.
Gail, what do you think?
Yeah, either way, either changing determine to one of Bobby's suggestions or adding any possible, I think either one works for me.
Right. I think the point is well taken, that the point is to gather data.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go Sharon first and then Lori.
I definitely don't like the idea of saying that we all unanimously agree with all of this wording, because I agree with some of it, but I don't necessarily think that this should be a budgetary priority. I definitely like the education pieces and some worker time and everything, but I don't necessarily think that, especially if we don't know what the costs are, that I would want to recommend that they definitely spend costs on it. I hope that there's some other ways that they can accomplish some significant things without that, especially to maybe determine a problem. But I that. And then I definitely feel like there's a lot of community comment about people wanting to see the transparency and the full data. And I think that's a fair thing to ask. And then also, I didn't like the wording towards the end that had to do with like it showed that there are people that are very against the call or a call or anything like that kind of an action. I think I would want to make it at least a lot more clear that that's not an end goal. I don't know, the wording made it sound like that was, I just would want it to make sure that what was I trying to say here? Yeah, that's, what does it say? I don't know, you say we shouldn't begin talking about it, but then you're mentioning it without like the full saying that this is not about like we definitely aren't agreeing with anything lethal. I don't know. It was weird to me.
This is Jean again. I think that if the city were to do anything, it would have to be in conjunction with the DNR, which would do a full aerial study of deer population, and there would be a lot more science in addition to what Mr. Kushner has already put forward, informing our process. So the DNR would definitely be involved in something if we decided to do something.
So Jean, what you're suggesting is if the city were to contact the DNR for their assistance with anything going forward, it would not necessarily be a cost to the city. It would be a role of the DNR that's part of their job. Is that correct? I mean, it's really not.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope that that's not a cost to the city, if that's definitely what the DNR does.
And that's my understanding of whose responsibility this is ultimately.
So it's really not up to us. The city budget is really not up. That's really not part of our decision-making process.
So then what if we just cut the phrase that says identify funding sources?
I think that sounds good.
Okay. And then
or maybe instead of identify, like as funding sources are identified, so then it puts the impetus on the city commission and the city manager to do it. Sorry, I know Lori's next. I do have a comment after her though.
Okay, Lori?
Yes. I share the concern about, there were comments in the phone-in comments about transparency, and it still feels like something is definitely missing, that this document has not been released to the public. And there's a lot of discussion about it goes to the commission gets it in a packet and so forth. But when does this obviously very involved and very strongly feeling public get to see this actual report, which is the subject of this discussion and of the recommendation? I do support the wording of the recommendation. I think it clarifies things very well, but I really would like to see us urge that this report be available to anyone, not just the commission, not just the ECC. It's in our interest, it's in the interests of the commission, and it's in the interests of the community.
So what if we just added a fourth point recommending that when the city commission receives the Deer Committee report, the final draft of it, that they make that publicly available and that they make the survey data publicly available
at the very same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
we can add that.
Yeah, Aaron, when it comes to the city commission, then it is publicly available,
right,
online through our packet.
But so that is really, I mean, a lot of people don't know that, and they don't know that they can access the packet and so forth. And I think that's been one of the problems. I mean, we've had, how many calls do we have today about don't call, don't call, don't call? And if the public had had access to the report, which does not say call, a lot of that detouring and that public sentiment could have been taken care of and dealt with in a.
Well, I understand that, but the report will be public, and I'm not sure how you're supposed to draft a report at what point do you finish a report and release it to the public? If it's still in draft form,
well, if it's come to an advisory committee to the city commission and is coming to the commission, and a lot of stuff is being done about it, but the general public has not had access to it as yet, I don't understand why that has to happen. What's wrong? What is there about the report that it has to be sequestered from the general public?
Because it wasn't finished.
Well, what's going to happen to finish it? The ECC is commenting on what we got, right? The commission is going to get what we got. So what's unfinished? It just feels very cloudy.
I think maybe if I can offer, I think I have similar concerns, and maybe it can be phrased this way. So, Aaron, I think your point is well made in terms of how do you create a public document and then have work done on it, like we're doing with the sustainability plan. That's not necessarily public yet. I think one of the concerns is that if we were to recommend a plan without a couple of things that I'll mention in a second, that this recommendation for just doing a deer study and the education plan ends up in the consent agenda on the commission, which is something that's not publicly discussed and could just end up on the January consent agenda. City commissioners are like, oh, deer study sounds great, let's do it. But then there's no space between the ECC and the adoption of it for any public discussion. And so I think one of the things I would suggest is, I like the idea about adding a point, and I would add it not at the end, but at the beginning, that perhaps before any city staff allocates any time, attention, or resources to this, and any decision is made, that the draft report and the survey data be made public, because I think that reflects a lot of the phone calls we're hearing. And then the other side of it is, I wanted to lead with, I think this recommendation is very good. I applaud both you, Aaron, and Dr. Walter for the work you put in, and also Gail, thank you for that supplementary research and your recent master's in deer research that you've garnered in doing all that hard work. I think the recommendation is still missing one small piece, though. After we would add some condition about this certain data needs to be made public, is that we've been receiving calls probably since August, and partially to Lori's point, because it's amorphous and cloudy, at least 5 to 7 phone calls every month for the last 4 months, people opposing a deer call. And then last month, I believe, was 7, with maybe 1 person in addition to Mr. Kushner proposing a plan. And then this week, we had 16 phone calls, 13 against a call specifically, 13 for releasing the public data, and then 3 calls that are either pro a plan, or 1 comically short, in my opinion, that's just, let's kill them all. So, but I think what I'm saying, though, is there needs to be something in this recommendation reflecting the public comment that we're getting with such continued pressure, as Dr. Kornheiser talked about. So I think, my closing comment would be, I like what we got here, especially if we add a point about make the data and the draft plan public before the city commission decides on anything. And then maybe if we could add a line towards the closing bullet on culling, that we've received overwhelming, truly, public comment opposing a deer call, especially at this stage. So those would be kind of my tidbits. And thank you.
So what do you think?
Is this making sense?
What do you think? Number 1, city staff should make the ad hoc deer committee report and survey data publicly available.
Aaron?
Prior to any city commission discussion or adoption of anything would be the only addition.
So I would recommend that it come to a committee of the whole meeting, which is not adoption, which is simply education and here's the information. That would not be any adoption. And so that's where it could be made totally public. It would be a part of the packet for that meeting, but there's no deliberation, there's no debate, there's no motion to approve anything. It's just like, here it is. This is what we've been doing. Here's Pete Kushner, here's Aaron Wright, here's Rebecca Kick from the city, and we'll get all pieces of that given to us at city commission level, and nothing needs to happen from that. And then if we want something to happen from that, or if staff wants something to happen from that, it would go then to an agenda item. So that it be made public, that we could ask that it be made public at a committee of the whole meeting.
I like that a lot, Commissioner Hess. Thank you.
Yeah, that's where we would get the most out of it, because it would have input from city staff, from ECC, and from the report itself. So that's what I would suggest. And that's what I would hope we could do.
Okay, so just short and sweet. City Commission should make the ad hoc Deer Committee report and survey data publicly available at a committee of the whole meeting.
Indeed. Yep. At a future committee of the whole meeting. Yep.
And then the only other thing that I was requesting is somewhere near the line on saying we're not even talking about a call right now. I would just think that it would be appropriate for us to add that there's been overwhelming public comment at these meetings in opposition to a call specifically. So that would be my two. And I do agree with Sharon's point about like budgeting, but also Gail's right that that's not necessarily our purview. So I guess I wouldn't have any recommendations specifically about money, but yeah, thanks for listening to me blabber.
Yeah, so I cut the line about identify funding sources. So it just says city staff should research and implement a deer population and ecological evaluation in areas already known to be natural preserves for the local deer herd.
And I would support the acknowledgement at some point in the report that the ECC has had overwhelming comment against deer culling. It's simply telling the commission and the public that we acknowledge this citizen input that we encourage. Because there seems to be a feeling, an uneasiness. I'm not saying it's justified, but if we have the ability to ameliorate it, we should do that. The uneasiness about the lack of transparency. I'm not saying it's reality, but.
The ECC has had frequent public input over the last few months. Regarding this issue. With a large majority. Opposed to any possible lethal deer call.
I won't nitpick too much, but I think it's even bigger than large. It's literally all but 4 calls in 5 months that are opposed to a call.
Right. Could we change the word frequent to overwhelming, or is that too strong of a word?
ECC has had frequent public input over the last few months regarding this issue with an overwhelming majority.
I know that Dr. Meliwish has his hand up waiting to speak. I just want to say, we have to, I think, recognize that there's been some confusion about the lack of information that people have gotten about this, and it's been the same people calling in every month. So I am not in favor of making a big deal out of this because I know for some people it's been a very emotional response, and it's the same people who have been calling in. So I can't say that it's overwhelming. I can't say that it's frequent. We can say we have received calls from people, but I'm not in favor of making it, any stronger than that.
I think that's a fair point, but at the same time, I've been writing down the names, and it's like 4 or 5 people are definitely the like consistent people, and then I'd say about 4 or 5 different voices circulate in that. But I think, as we talked about again with the river situation, there has to be some weight to consistent pressure too, versus somebody saying, I guess I'll call for 5 seconds today and voice my opinion, and that's good enough. So I think like consistent pressure is definitely part of the democratic process as well. So that'd be my case for it, I think.
Dr. Maluish?
Thank you. I think the paragraph that you've already written takes care of that. I don't think we have to put all that in there. Besides, even if there are a total of 50 telephone calls that you've received, there is 2/3 of the 1,600 responses in the survey, which is obviously not scientific, just as these telephone calls are not. We don't really know what the people in the city are thinking. It's a very unscientific survey. We just got a good idea, and neither are the calls that people call in. I think that's putting too much weight on giving too much weight to the people who are worried about a lethal deer call. I think the paragraph that you put in is just fine as it is.
My issue with that is I feel like, especially with Mr. Kushner's testimony last month, this survey is either for or against the position, depending on the most recent person that's talked about it. Like I hope this doesn't come across too, I don't know, no disrespect, I guess is what I'm saying, but it's hard to say this survey represents 2/3 of people supporting an action, and then also this survey doesn't represent, or these phone calls or this survey doesn't represent citizen input, when again, we've talked about it ad nauseum, this survey was not well designed. We've talked about this over and over and over every month. Not only was it not well designed, but it's not public information. And that's not fair to be making our choices or opinions on it at this point, I think.
Well, that's why I think we should just leave the issue as it is. Put this paragraph in here that tells everybody that we're just going to study it. We're not going to do any planning on any deer call. We're going to study it. And neither of us here, none of us know what the percentage of the population that's for or against this or for or against that by either the telephone calls or the survey. I think we just don't know enough. Let's get the facts out there first.
I'm not talking about facts, and I'm not talking about scientific evidence one way or another. I'm simply saying it's a sort of, I hate that expression, public relations, but it's an acknowledgement. I mean, if you don't acknowledge that people have called and said certain things, then why ask them to call? Why say we are open to this? Why spend all this time? I mean, unfortunately, if the survey results had been public and it hadn't said anything about call, I don't think we would have gotten all these calls. But it wasn't. So we had people call, we asked people to do input, we very carefully record them and listen to them. And then if we don't even have a sentence in this statement acknowledging that we have gotten, I mean, Ian said something like we had 16 phone calls. Well, that's not just 4 or 5 people. It's simply a matter of acknowledging that we got them. We're not saying we feel this way or that way. And I just see that as kind of a peripheral person at this point on the ACC, and not having a lot of sophistication about how one reaches documents even after they're made public, let alone before they're made public. I just feel that one sentence acknowledging we've had calls which have been where people have been upset. I mean, if I were going to strategize making this plan, I think that would be useful information, that there's a lot of strong feeling about this and that we need to emphasize the fact that we are starting with education and that we have other things in mind. It's well, I've said enough, especially as a non-voting person here. Thanks for listening.
Well, I'm just saying, if you read this last paragraph, it says the ECC recognizes that there are differing opinions in the community regarding any possible lethal deer management strategies that might be employed here, as they have been in other communities. And they're recommending to the city staff that we just make an assessment and study it. I mean, it takes care of it right here without giving any weight one way or the other to the two different sides of this.
I just don't think if there was an election and it
was
was 90% one way and 10% another, it would be satisfactory to say there's differing opinions on who should win this election. And I think that's roughly the numbers we're talking about here, is like 9-1 or so. I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it tells the whole picture if we don't include that.
I would point out though that you're talking about, maybe not even 30, maybe 30 people that have called in over the last few months versus some 1,600 people who responded to the survey. And I know your contention is that the survey was kind of biased to begin with, but that's a big difference in sample size, basically. So other than this one sentence, does anybody have any other anything else, any other suggestions or suggested changes? All right, seeing none, here is my suggestion. I'm going to take out the word overwhelming to tame it down a little bit. So the ECC has had frequent public input over the last few months regarding this issue, which is true. We've had way more calls to the ECC than we ever have about any other issue in 5 years, with a majority opposed to any possible lethal deer call.
But I'm just going to contend that this paragraph doesn't reflect what you've just said about people not calling in very often, and then they called in very often. I think majority is fair. Huh?
It says frequent public input.
What I mean is, so we're getting rid of overwhelming, if fine,
Right.
but you said we've had significant jump in attention and calls in. I don't know if that's reflected when we don't say how the calls are landing beyond just a simple majority. That could be 51-49, and that's not what it is.
Well, I tell you who will understand, where those calls are is the city commission. Once they open this up, they'll receive all those same calls. I don't think True. that our recommendation is harmed one way or the other by the addition or deletion of one word. So in the interest of kind of bringing everybody together here, do we have a motion? Are we unanimous on this, I guess? Because I would love to send, a unanimous recommendation sent to city commission. City staff holds more weight than a divided committee. Are we ready to take a vote?
Can we look through those 3 points again real quick? I want to see how you change them.
Yeah, and we actually got 4 now. So number 1, the city commission should make the ad hoc deer committee report and survey data publicly available at a committee of the whole meeting. 2, city staff should develop, we didn't change this one, city staff should develop an education program for citizens regarding deer management strategies such as unpalatable landscape plants and natural or environmentally friendly chemical repellents, fencing, and other deterrents. The education component should also make residents aware that there is a state law that bans the feeding of deer and that the city will support and enforce this. 3, city staff should review available options for deer carcass removal within the city. 4, city staff should research and implement a deer population and ecological evaluation in areas already known to be natural preserves for the local deer herd.
I can live with it. I think it generally reflects the feedback we're getting from both sides.
Gail?
I'm still not comfortable with that. And what I think might be a possible solution is, you know, the results of the survey demonstrate that over 64% of respondents are concerned about the effects of deer on the ecosystem. And you know, those people aren't concerned about calling the ECC, perhaps. So, I mean, I think maybe we need to acknowledge we have gotten phone calls that differ from the results of the survey. You know, it's just, we've gotten calls from people, but they're people who are, you know, have a vested interest in calling. It doesn't necessarily, because people are calling, doesn't necessarily reflect a majority opinion. So it's not like a you know, a vote, an election, you know, with 90%, 10%. We're just talking about individuals who were, you know, passionate enough to call. And that doesn't necessarily reflect the opinions of everybody else, as you had said, Aaron.
I don't know. I think if we're talking about vested interest by people calling in, we're not hearing that, because the people calling in are opposed to a call and for transparency. When we're talking vested interest, on the 6 points listed in the ad hoc report that nobody besides this committee and the ad hoc committee have seen, private protection of private property is listed on 2 of those points. There's your vested interest, I think. So I disagree. And again, I don't think the survey is useful in really any respect, because it was not designed by the city, as we learned last month, sorry. It was designed by a private individual who clearly knows what they wanted to get out of it. So I don't want any mention of the survey results in this if I'm going to vote for it, because it's not reasonable.
I think same, just because also that hasn't been out there. I'm okay with the wording how it is.
And Gail, I think that there's 2 issues that we're maybe putting together here. There's a deer call, and then there's some kind of deer management, right? So I think everybody could probably, most people I think are getting, you know, think it's a reasonable idea to let's count up the deer, look at any ecological impact, and then discuss some type of deer management program. But we do have a small number of people who have called in who are very vocally opposed to a deer cull, which is different than saying, you know, deer management. So, and I don't know. I mean, the city commission is going to get all of this information the same. I don't think that this one line that says that we've had frequent public input over the last few months regarding this issue, with the majority opposed to any possible lethal deer call. I don't think that's going to color the city commission or city staff's, you know, opinion about what they might want to do with any deer population data or ecological impact data. I think they're going to hear from all the same folks. They'll see the survey data. They'll see the difference in sample size, and be able to determine for themselves what the best course is.
Well, you had just said, Aaron, that there was a small number of people who have called in. And if we can include that in the sentence, that would be okay, because you're talking 30 people at the most.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. The ECC has had frequent public input over the last few months regarding this issue, with majority of, I don't know, around 30 is kind of my ballpark guess. I've got that document in the shared drive.
I think we're leaning towards the other direction. Like I agreed with, or not even agreed, I will consent to removing overwhelming. But as you said yourself, this number of calls in a vacuum, like in this paragraph, if the city commissioners aren't paying attention to the ECC, 30 to 40 calls might sound like a lot, and it might sound like nothing. And without context, I don't know if that detail makes sense. But there is a context to the numbers that we can count by looking at the meeting minutes and such. So I don't know. If we're going to take out overwhelming, I don't want to put in 30 to 40 calls over 5 months or whatever. That would be my point.
Yeah, but that's the number. Why wouldn't, I mean?
Yeah, we could put, excuse me, this is Jean. We could put that in. We will probably get at least 30 to 40 calls during that committee of the whole meeting. I would also hope that Aaron could represent ECC for any questions and clarify anything that we might have said and that you might have said in this letter. And that the calls today were the result of a specifically targeted email campaign to folks who are opposed to the call. So just so we know, and a lot of the language was the same in all of them because it was put out there for them.
That's democratic participation in organization. That cannot be held against the people that are calling in.
No,
Absolutely
I'm not
not.
holding it against them, but there was no other email saying that, you know, for people to for a pro call. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah,
yes,
that's because they're organized towards this issue. I don't think that's acceptable, Commissioner Hess.
Thank you. There were 30 calls out of 76,000 residents in Kalamazoo.
Fair.
So yeah, there were a lot. And so what the committee, the whole meeting will do is bring in a lot more voices, and all those voices will call again and let themselves be heard. So they will be heard by City Commission.
So is there a motion to approve our recommendations to City Commission and City staff as written here?
I would say I'm not sure that it helps to put in that numerical information, Aaron. It was probably better without it.
I agree.
I agree with Gail.
too.
It doesn't help at all. It just clouds.
I would agree.
Yeah, it makes it more difficult to understand.
Okay. All right. How about now?
I can live with it.
All right, so that is a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second. All in favor? Go ahead and raise your hand for me. Dr. Meluish, are you in favor of the recommendation as written? I can't hear you, Dr. Meluish.
I don't know what's actually written right now. I'm sorry. What's written now?
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it. All right.
Okay.
Aaron,
Yes, sir.
in the event that we are not unanimous in this vote, can we just take out the word unanimously? Can we just say the ECC agrees?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Or just say the majority of the ECC agrees. What do you think, Dr. Meluish? You still reading?
Well, I don't know how this is any different than what you've already written here, other than to make the ad hoc Deer Committee report and survey data publicly available.
It's not. There's not really anything different.
All right, then I think this letter that we're writing should be made public if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, sending it to the City Commission and city staff. So I'm counting votes here. All in favor, go ahead, raise your hand for me. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Dr. Walter, you're a no.
I'm going to abstain.
I'd like to maybe I would like to listen to again what Dr. Walter is objecting to. I guess I'm not clear about that.
I'm just uncomfortable with that last sentence that we put in about the phone calls.
Oh, I didn't see that put in there. Where was that?
So again, the sentence says the ECC has had frequent public input over the last few months regarding this issue, with the majority opposed to any possible lethal deer call, which is just a flat statement of fact.
Also,
should we clarify that input was in the form of phone calls? Does that matter?
We've gotten emails too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I take my vote back. I'm not comfortable with that either. I think that just throws in an opinion that doesn't have much reliability when you think of so many people that took the deer survey said it was a serious problem. And we've already covered this deer call in that paragraph you already wrote. So yeah, I'm with Gail Walter. I think it just throws another cloud into it. I'm against it.
Well, okay. I mean, I would point out that that the 4 recommendations that are going to the city commission support everything in the Deer Committee report.
Sure, but why put that in there? People object, they'll object again. If people are for something, they can call in for something.
Because we have 11 members on the ECC, and not everybody has the same opinion.
Right.
And so I'm trying to make a document that is reflecting all of the opinion on the ECC.
Right.
Well,
the main thrust of the recommendation supports the ad hoc committee report.
Okay, I understand, but I'll abstain. I just think the report as it was is fine. Putting this in here clouds the issue. So I'll just abstain. If you want to put down 11-2, that's fine too. Just abstain. 11.
It would be, okay. Dr. Walter, you're still, I have not moved you. Okay, all right. All right, then the motion passes. We have 10 of us here today. So we had 8 yes and 2 abstentions and 1 absent. So I will remove the word unanimously. So, and I'll change it to the majority.
Well, if the motion passes, the ECC recommends it. You don't have to say unanimous, right? Or is there some reason why it's important to say unanimous?
I think it's just because in the past, we've frequently been unanimous, but we aren't today. And we're a full hour over, and I think we've approved the language, so we should probably call this good.
Doesn't have to be unanimous.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, we have 2 more items before I can go eat my sandwich. One is election of officers. I am more than happy to serve as chair of the ECC for another year. Would anybody else like to throw their hat in the ring?
Nope.
It seems like such an appealing role on days like today.
No, I have really truly enjoyed it. You know, I enjoy the public participation. I enjoy hanging out with you folks and talking about these very important issues. So, you know, I enjoy doing this.
I think you do a great job, Aaron. I second your nomination if you're nominating yourself.
Amen.
I think I can nominate myself. Ian, are you interested in serving as vice chair again for another year?
Sure.
Okay, so do we have motion to keep officers basically the same going forward?
Make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Let me see please raise your hand. All right, no abstentions this time. Outstanding. Okay. That is settled. We have officers for next year. Last piece of business. We are expected to be back in person. No ifs, ands, or buts next month. You cannot vote. There was a memo that went out to all the boards and committees that I got today. You cannot vote remotely. You have to show up in person for your vote to count. We can continue. You have to wear a mask, and we'll have to practice social distancing. I'm not sure what that would look like if we just kind of spread out a little bit more in that community room. If we want to continue broadcasting via YouTube or Zoom meeting, we can do that, but we would have to do it in the city commission's chambers where there are 10 seats, but we have 11 members. And city IT staff will not support that anymore. They won't take care of phone calls, and they won't take care of the live stream.
I have a question, Aaron.
Yeah.
Do you, as an older resident, excuse me, I do want to be on the screen, but as an older resident who is one of the fragile population, are we really sure that the city is going to enforce this into January? I don't know how many of you have read the blog that one of our local doctors sent out a couple of days ago about
as of
COVID. It's desperate.
As of today, that's what the direction is. If there's a change in the direction, I'll certainly email that out to everybody. But as of right now, we are expected to meet in person. I would rather that we just go back to the way that we had met in the past, where we meet in the community room, we spread out a little more, everybody wears masks, and we end the Zoom meeting and the streaming over YouTube. And if folks want to have public participation, they either need to send an email or show up in person to the meeting. What does everybody else think?
I'm disappointed. I mean, not just, I think it's a statewide thing, but, the latest evidence is that the new variant, the Omicron variant, is more resistant. Your boosters and your vaccines protect you less from the Omicron variant. So we're entering into a really, dangerous period of where we're all going to be more susceptible, even if we've been vaccinated. And now we're being forced to go back into meeting in person. And, I'm, from a medical point of view, I'm not real pleased about that.
I'm not excited about it.
Aaron, I saw the same email that you're referring to from, I think, Melissa. And so I was a little unclear on the IT situation, because personally, I mean, in addition to the concerns for COVID and our, immunocompromised and older friends, I do like the transparency aspect too of people being able to watch online. I think we've seen a lot of comments and activity, especially on Facebook. Would that mean that we ourselves, one of us would have to bring in a camera and stream it or something? It's a little, maybe we should just keep working on this. I don't know.
Would you like an input from said IT?
That would be awesome.
I mean, normally we don't really do this type of thing and speak in a meeting, but first I will mention, considering I was in the big meeting that happened today with CMO's office about this whole process. One, I will mention, we're not talking the city is forcing you all back into public meetings. It is state law that comes into effect January 1. This isn't something the city decided. This is something that we are all having to do statewide. Now that can change, but at this point, as of Jan 1, it is state law that we're going to be in person from the Open Meetings Act changes and whatnot. Anyway, as for the other part that you're more interested in, There is a thing that came out. I think there would have been the separate memo that was a result of the meetings that Jeff / whoever passed along to your city staff is regarding how the IT is going to be handling this. We are going to be there at your first in-person meeting. Especially if you decide that you want to continue to stream, like if you still want this to be a live stream of some type, you have to make it known that you want this to be a thing, and not to me. You want to make this known through your city staff so they get it appropriately announced to clerks and whatnot, so they know this is going to be going forward. And then you can arrange, probably also through your city staff person liaison, to have training for multiple people in your group, as many as you want. Should show up to a training session, and we will walk through how the systems will work, how you would do the thing, and decide whether this is something that's going to happen on PMN, if you wanted it to be that broadcasted, or if this is just going to still be like a YouTube, Facebook type situation. It's like it's a whole, let's coordinate how you want to move this forward. And then on top of that training, IT will also show up to your first public meeting and be there as an assistant to walk you through. While you do it, we can point out this is what you need to do. If you had questions, we can answer it. And then from there on out, you would be in charge of it. And to point of equipment and whatnot, especially if you're going to be doing the streaming, which currently it's the commission's chamber where that would be happening, all the equipment's there. All the computers are there, all the equipment's there, everything's ready to go, set up for public, as well as, while there will no longer be public comments that are pre-recorded, that function is going away. We do have a new system in place where the public can call in. Think of it kind of like a radio show type situation where they call in and they have a waiting list of people. They would call the number and it would be first come, first serve. And then when you get to public comments, you would go, caller ending in 353, you're up, go. And it would let them talk, and then you can pause, or you can just let it go immediately to the next one, and you kind of have control over it. Plus, if something gets out of hand, you can mute or cancel or whatnot. It's kind of a web page that you would have control over, just an incoming call phone number, but it would be live. It would no longer be pre-recorded. But that option is still a possibility for live interaction with the public. So these are all things that we will train you on before we kind of let you loose into the environment on your own. So that's kind of a brief overview of what's happening with how this change is going to be implemented.
All right, thanks very much, Andy. Let's do this. Let's figure by email over the next few weeks. I will send out an email, and we can basically take a vote by email, because this isn't about any recommendation or anything to the city commission. We can do this stuff by email. Do we want to meet in the city commission's chambers and continue to stream, or do we want to meet like we did prior to COVID, where there's no streaming and we're back in the community room? I don't know that anybody. I think I'd rather have you guys think about it. I think it's better for us to think about it for a couple of days instead of just take a vote on that right now. Plus, we don't have everybody here. Does that sound acceptable to everybody? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and skip the rest of our agenda and move right to the end here because we put our time in for the night. Any other comments for the good of the order? All right, we are adjourned until next month, when I will see you all in person. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, folks.